All right guys, in this video I'm going to talk about combining watercolor with some line and the various tools available. This is just the tip of the iceberg, but I'm just going to show you a few of the things that I like to use and the different effects that you can get with them. And just talk about order of operations and what will happen with the different various tools. All right, so let's just jump right into it. One of my favorite things to do is to use a light pencil line with these big clicksters. This one happens to be an HB, but I love these. They're inexpensive and I just kind of like them. They have a cool eraser on them. So we're gonna use that. Then the Cretacolor Monolith is another go-to of mine. I just love the feel of this guy. It doesn't have a sheath to it, so it's just got a nice kind of weight to it. This one happens to be an HB. They do sharpen to a very nice point, so I like them. And then I have Mars Lumograph Black. Has a nice dark line to it, and they're kind of satisfying to draw with. This one happens to be a 4B. And then moving on, here, this is a Pilot, just a regular fine point pen. And these are really great, again, inexpensive. You can throw, get a whole package of them, throw a couple in your purse, a couple in the studio. So I really like these. Nice pen. It does have its limitations, and it is water soluble, so we'll talk about that. Then here we have the Lamy, and this is a fountain pen style pen. A nice pen. You can produce a variety of line weights and some nice effects with it. It is a fountain style pen, so you need to be a little careful with it in terms of taking it with you places. It does tend to clog up a little bit, so you got to work on that a bit. But it is, again, portable. Now, again, this Lamy happens to have water-soluble ink, and all the Lamys do come with that water-soluble ink in them. And so we'll talk about how that works with watercolor. And it is appropriate for some different kinds of effects that you might want to get, others maybe not quite as much. Then moving on, we have the traditional nibs. And using India ink, you can get a very elegant type of line, thick and thin, nice cross hatching, and you can use different nibs to get different effects, kind of calligraphy style effects, depending on what you want to do with them. And then the glass pens, glass nibs. I like these. They're kind of fun to use. I like the weight of these. The little ends do tend to break off, so you need to be a little bit careful with these guys because they're glass. All right, let's get right into it and play around with these. Okay, so I'm going to start in with a couple of samples. I want to leave a little bit of room to make a little label. So one of my favorite things to do is start with a nice light pencil line when I'm doing watercolor. So this works really well just to start out a super light line like so. You can get a little heavier if you want, but I like to do this, and then I can add a darker pen line over the top at the end if I want. But I'm just going to draw a little hibiscus flower. This is a beautiful flower that was in my garden this year. Crazy big flower, like the size of a dinner plate, actually. Really neat flower. So I'm just going to get a little flower shape in here now. I'm going to play around with the pencil a little bit. Something like this will hardly show up with watercolor over the top, just slightly. Also, the watercolor will tend to stay within these lines a little bit. Of course, if you press a little harder even, the watercolor will tend to stay even more in the lines because you're actually kind of making a little indentation into the paper, so that can kind of help hold the watercolor in its place. And of course, depending on the technique that you use with watercolor, that will also affect how much the watercolor is going to stay within the shapes. But I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of this, so I'm rubbing the pencil into the paper a little bit. Now what that's going to do is that's gonna mix a little bit right in this section with the watercolor, as you'll see. So I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna go ahead and using a clean brush or relatively clean brush here, and I'm gonna just wet my flower petals. And that alone, if you played with watercolor at all, you know that that alone will tend to keep your you can hold your shape, and you can just flood that shape with color, and the watercolor is gonna pretty much stay in that shape. See how it kind of pools to the edge, doesn't really go outside. Now having that pencil, a little bit of pencil line there, also assists with that, because again, the pencil just has dug in very slightly and scored the paper just a little bit. Okay, so that's really, really nice. And you can see the pencil line shows up a little bit, and depending on how much you play with that pencil line and how hard you press, and all of that. Now let's go ahead and get a little bit of water, and I get a little different color. I get a little green going. A nice light green. How's that? That's pretty. And I'm going to put that right here. And see, it mixes a little bit, and see now I've got a little bloom here on the edge. It mixes a little bit with the graphite. Now if I come down here, you see it's a little clearer, right? The color is just a little clearer without the graphite under there. So that graphite's gonna actually sort of mix in with the watercolor just a bit. So I'm gonna avoid my shape and just come in. Okay, so that's really nice, and then you can let this dry, and then you could come back over this and get a more intense pencil line if you wanted. It just depends on what look you're after. I usually like to add some line to my watercolor. I'm not a purist when it comes to watercolor. I like the idea of watercolor sketching. It just helps free me up, and I'm not usually looking to sell my watercolors. They're usually in my sketchbook, studies, personal work, permission work, just playing around. So orienting myself to sketching is really helpful for me. Okay, let's move on to the Cretacolor Monolith this time. And it's going to get much the same effect, but I do like this type of pencil line. It's just a real satisfying pencil to hold in your hand, so I like it a lot. A little bit sharper, and that's just really just a function of that this is just a little bit harder HB, different brand, different kind of quality pencil. So just again, playing with the line. And maybe this time come in a little bit softer. And maybe rub some of that graphite in. That's going to give it a little different effect than just coming with the cross-hatching line, because that graphite will tend to mix a little bit more with the watercolor when you've rubbed it into the surface of the paper than just coming with more of a line like so. So over here it's going to mix with the paint a little bit more than it will tend to do over here. So let's give that a try. I'm going to really clean out my brush. And I'm really cleaning out my brush. I like to do that in between colors. So I have 2 jars of water here. And when I have the opportunity to do that, I like to do that. Use one for cleaning out between colors and one for mixing with color. So again, that pencil line is going to tend to help me hold that that shape. I didn't wet this prior, so it's gonna have a slightly different look to it. You can come in and play with pull out some color here and there. But that line kind of shows through as well there. Now let's mix with some green. Let's see what we get over here. It's a little bit harder pencil, so it's not mixing quite as much over here. And then here, see, it's a little cleaner looking. Of course, I let it bloom there. But this, both of these have a nice, fresh, kind of clean look to them, which I really, really like. All right, let's come over here with the lumograph now. Do the same thing. And I'll maybe get a little different shape this time around, just for variety. A little different view of my hibiscus here. Big flower, really big flower. So I'm going to add some line here. It has these striations in it, which were really beautiful. So you can see just a little bit darker line, and you just pressing a little bit, see how nice and dark that line is. So if that's what you're looking for in a pencil line, a nice dark pencil line, this is a nice tool. And I'll go ahead and add a little value here. See how really good and dark that is. It's really fun to use. And you can get nice thick and thin with that. Okay, let's try the watercolor with this. And this is really going to hold that. I've pressed pretty hard, it's really scored into the paper, so that's going to really help hold the shape as well. So just doing a little pencil line is another advantage of it, is that it's going to help hold the watercolor into the masses that you're painting. All right, I'm going to come in with some green down here. And see, mixes a little bit with the graphite, but it's still pretty clear. It has a pretty clean look. A little heavier because it's just a heavier line. So this is way more delicate, you know, a little bit more graphic here, not quite as delicate. Okay, now let's move on to some pen. Okay, this is where the order of operations gets kind of important. So this time I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the pilot pen line down first. I'm going to show you what's going to happen when I do that, because this is water soluble. So you can probably guess what's going to happen. It's going to mix with the watercolor. And I'm going to do that with the Lamy, and then I'm going to do it with the India ink. And then I'm going to show you doing it the opposite way, putting down the watercolor and then the pen line over it. So you can make this work, but you do want to be a little careful here when you're working. So this is not what I would typically do. What I would typically do would be to do a light pencil line, do the watercolor, and then at the end come along with the pilot. But just to show you, I want to show you what's going to happen with this line if you use the pen first. And you can probably guess it's not that great of a result. So just get a couple of these shapes real quick in here, because this is really not what I want to be doing. But this pen is kind of nice. You can get some nice cross hatching in here. Again, it's super convenient, inexpensive. You can get a bunch of these, throw some in your purse or your backpack, and then have a bunch of them lying around in your studio. So they're super convenient to have. And I use them all the time. You just gotta think about the order of operations here is really the thing. So here we go. So let's go ahead, and we know what's going to happen. It's not going to be pretty. And so you really get kind of a muddy, kind of not a great look here. Now, however, for something like this, not great, right? Something botanical, when you want something delicate and you want really nice bright color, this is not going to work, right? But if you're doing something that you're doing urban sketching, you're using architecture, having the pen line mix with the watercolor, that might be something you want. So it really just depends on the look. And you know, it's not, you know, there's some interesting stuff here, just not for this particular subject matter, more than likely not what's desirable. Okay, let's do that with the Lamy as well. So it's going to be a similar result with the Lamy. And the Lamy is a nice pen. Look at that. It's got a nice, you know, feel to it. Though these Lamys, they can, it's a fountain pen, so you have to maintain it, and you have to kind of work on making sure that you keep it flowing, the ink flowing to it. So not quite as easy and convenient for me as that Pilot pen, but it has a really kind of cool line to it, right? It's interesting line. You can do a lot with it. It has that fountain pen feel to it, and it's got a nice weight to it. And Lamy has different sort of levels. You can spend a lot on them, or you can, they have a line that's a little bit less expensive. So it, you know, it's a nice pen. And with just a little practice, you can, you know, you can get all kinds of effects. You can turn it over and get a nice, see that, a real thin crosshatch. You know, so it's nice. But let me show you the same thing. So again, I'm gonna let it sit a little bit to show you, even letting it sit, that ink is really water soluble. So we'll let it sit for just a sec here. You can see that it's losing its kind of sheen, so it's drying out a little bit. All right, let's come in and add the watercolor. See, it's very, very similar look to that Pilot pen. And again, depending on the subject matter, this might be something you want. I did some urban sketching, and you know, this kind of look was really great with that. But for you know, for botanicals, flowers, probably not what we're going for here. All right. Let me see what happens when I add that green. Just for the fun of it. Yep, it's real heavy. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the India ink. All right. And then the first I'm going to use the regular, more traditional nib. And this one's just a real simple one. Dip my pen in there. I love these. You can get a real elegant kind of line, real thick and thin. It's really fun to use. Really nice. You get all kinds of stippling. I'll just see the real thick and thin, lighten up pressure. Real nice and flowing. See that? It's really, really fun to use. Takes a little practice. I'm going to refill it. Now, of course, the disadvantage here is that it's not something you want to stick in your purse, right? It's not that portable. You don't want to have that ink going anywhere on you, so definitely a different animal than, say, the Pilot or even the Lamy. Now, there's different kinds of fountain pens other than the Lamys. The Lamy's not the end-all for sure. But they are nice pens. Okay, so let's get some cross-hatching in here. See, look at how, you can get really, really delicate with the cross-hatching with this tool. And then you can come in and get some nice dark, fill in with some darks. I'm just going to play with the line a little bit here. And then we'll let this dry completely and then come over it with some watercolor and see what happens with that. And of course, you can probably guess this is very waterproof and light fast ink. Okay. Let's just get a little leaf shape in here. All right. And get some nice darks so you can really see what happens with that. Okay, let's let that dry. Okay, now this India ink has dried completely, and you can probably guess what's going to happen here. That watercolor is going to just go over that really nicely and not mix with that ink at all. So this, of course, is a really good option if you're wanting to put the line down prior to the watercolor. Or go back and forth at all, because there are times when I'm going to do that. Meaning going back and forth between applying the drawing and the background and the line. So here, that mix is because I've mixing the colors together there. So it has a nice clean look to it. Of course, it's very different than the pencil line. It's not as delicate, but you can get a very delicate line with that tool. So now I want to show you how I would go if I wanted to use the Bic, the Pilot pen, and I wanted to use the Lamy. What I would do, and what I would typically do, is go ahead and get a light pencil line down. If I needed to draw at all, like I would do a very, very light pencil sketch of the shapes that I wanted. And then I would come in with my watercolor. So that pencil line's barely, barely, barely visible, right? It's not really even part of what's happening. Let that dry and then come in with the Pilot pen. So this time I'm going to add a little bit of the green background. It's kind of a cool color. Add a little bit more green. So we'll let that dry and we'll come back with the Pilot pen. Now let's do another one with, so we can show the Lamy at work in that same fashion. Same thing. I might come in with this. Really depends on what I'm doing, whether I need a pencil line to start or not. Get a bit of background color. I'll let it spread a little bit. It's fine. It's kind of fun. I've got some, there must be some oil from my fingers on the paper because I'm getting a little resist there. It's actually okay. It's kind of fun. I can come out and pull out some highlights if I want. Kind of adds to the texture. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry. And the last one I'm going to do the same thing on that last one, and I'm going to use that India ink again over the top of the watercolor. And you can probably guess what's going to happen. Here it's going to look very similar to this because it's really it's having that same effect. So let's just go ahead and put down another shape for flower. Don't really need the pencil line. It's going to have a really similar look to that one. Put a leaf in here. Okay, we'll let those dry and we'll come over these with some line. Okay, again, if you want a little bit more of a heavier line, want something a little bit more defined, not quite as delicate as this, so the Pilot pen might work for you here, but you definitely want to get the watercolor down first and let it dry completely before you start adding it. Because once you add even a little bit of water, not just the paint, but a little bit of water to this, it's really gonna spread. So, but you can, again, get this kind of nice, play around with it. You can get some nice effects here. And I use this really a lot. I like this pen. It's a good workhorse. It's a little more difficult to get kind of a thick and thin line with it than it is, say the Lamy or the traditional calligraphy and the nibs, but it can do a lot. A little bit of practice. And again, so this one is not per se a what not to do, but you can see there's a big difference in the two. So you might say it's what not to do. But I like to do this kind of thing. I like to do a little outline and maybe write some text with this pen. It's really kind of fun. All right, and you can get that kind of crosshatch look with it as well. You can get in here and get some darks. And again, I just have a whole bunch of these. I just buy a whole box of these at one time. Okay, all right, that's that one. Now let's try the Lamy. It's going to have a similar look, but the Lamy, make sure the Lamy's going pretty well. Again, it's a fountain pen, so it's a little more particular, but it also has a little bit more elegant line to it. You can get that thick and thin and come in. It's nice. Nice pen. It has a nice weight to it. It's a little bit more artistic. And you really have to me, there's different tools for different, not just different subjects and different, but to me, different tasks that I want to do in different places and different kinds of sketching that I want to do. And you just want to find your go-tos. You can see how it just has a different feel to it. It's just a different kind of pen. It's nice. See that you can get this kind of delicate. You can get a looser, more gestural line with this guy. All right. So that, to me, this is the answer. So putting down the watercolor first, and then the pen line. Now with this one, we could go back in here now, and we could add some watercolor. But we're gonna see what's happening already right there. We're getting that mix with the pen. So if you want to avoid that, if you want to keep it really fresh, you have to just not touch the pen line after you've gotten it down there. Okay, so let's do this last one, and you can probably guess what's going to happen here. It's going to look really, really similar to this one, because that line, let's try to get it a little more delicate this time, just for fun. But it has that same kind of feel, and that line's just going to stay nice and clean. It's not going to go anywhere. You can get a little bit more of that kind of gestural, articulated line more than you can with that pilot. And thick and thin. And let's just come in and make our little bounding box just so we can see what that's going to look like. And just try to keep it kind of similar in its look as the one up above. But it has a nice, clean, fresh look to it. And this one, what's kind of cool about this is if we let this one dry, we can come back in with some watercolor over the top of this line. So we can go back and forth between watercolor and pen line as much as we want, because we know that this line is just going to hold nice and clear and crisp, and it is waterproof. Okay, all right, guys, I hope this was helpful to you. I would suggest that you just find whatever tools you really love to use, experiment with them, try them out. Try the watercolor first and the line afterwards, the line first, the watercolor afterwards. See if you can go back and forth between them. Just experiment around and find what works for you. Okay, all right, bye-bye.